I thought I was just here to babysit for a weekend. I needed the money, nothing more. But when he looked at me, like really looked at me, and whispered, "You remind me of someone I once loved," my whole world changed. That someone was a black woman. If you've ever found yourself in a situation you never saw coming, hit that like button and subscribe. Because this story, it's not what you think. Stay with me till the end, you'll understand why. I was broke, like real life choosing between rent and ramen broke. College was draining every penny I had, books, fees, food, all of it. My part-time shifts weren't cutting it anymore, and I was starting to feel the weight of it all pressing down on me. That's when my friend hit me up with what sounded like the easiest gig ever. She told me about this babysitting job in the city, said the guy was some big-time businessman, super rich, barely ever home, just needed someone to watch his niece for a couple of days. The kid was supposed to be sweet and quiet, and the pay, way more than I usually made in a week. I didn't even hesitate. I said yes right away. In my head, I figured I'd read a few chapters for class, feed the kids snacks, maybe play some games, and be done. Easy money, no stress. I packed a bag, hopped on the train, and didn't think twice. But from the moment I walked into that mansion, something felt different. Not bad, just off. Like the air carried something unspoken. I thought I was just showing up for a weekend job. I had no idea my whole life was about to shift. When I got to the house, I froze for a second. It wasn't just big, it was massive, like the kind of house you only see in magazines or movies. Gated driveway, tall glass windows, perfect garden, and everything so quiet. I rang the bell, expecting a housekeeper or maybe a nanny to answer, but nope. He opened the door himself. Tall, sharp suit, not a single hair out of place. He looked like someone who lived and breathed control. No smile, just a nod. "You're the babysitter?" he asked. His voice was deep but calm, like someone used to being obeyed. I nodded, suddenly nervous. "Yes, sir. Yeah." He stepped aside to let me in. The inside of the house was even more intimidating. Marble floors, tall ceilings, art on the walls that I couldn't name but looked expensive. I was expecting chaos with a kid around, but everything was spotless. Then I met her, his niece. Sweetest little girl, maybe 6 years old. Big eyes, quiet voice. She was sitting at a table colouring when I walked in. He introduced us, said her name, then looked at me and said, "She likes stories and apple juice. Don't let her near the piano." That was it. No small talk, no smile. He turned and walked toward his office. But just before he disappeared down the hall, he paused and glanced back at me. Just for a second. I didn't know what that look meant, but something about it stayed with me. It was like he was trying to place me, like he recognized something in me but couldn't name it yet. I brushed it off, grabbed a juice box, and sat with his niece. I had no idea that look was the beginning of everything. At first, everything went as expected. His niece and I got along right away. She was bright, soft-spoken, and really into space stories and glitter. We'd sit on the floor with crayons, and she'd ask me to make up stories about astronauts who looked like her. It was sweet, simple, safe. But then things started to shift. It began with small things. Him lingering in the doorway when I was reading to her, or casually asking what I liked to study in school. Once, he walked in with groceries and handed me my favourite snack, without me ever mentioning it. I figured maybe he'd seen it in the trash or something, but still, it felt oddly personal. Then, one evening, after the little one had gone to bed, I stayed behind to clean up the living room. He came in with a glass of wine, sat at the kitchen counter, and watched me for a moment. "You know," he said slowly, "you remind me of someone I once knew." I didn't know what to say to that, so I smiled politely. "Someone good, I hope?" He didn't laugh, just nodded and looked down at his glass. Very. There was a pause, the kind that stretches just a little too long. I finished wiping down the counter and said goodnight, feeling his eyes on me the whole walk to the guest room. From that moment on, his energy changed. He'd ask me questions, not just polite ones, but personal ones, about my dreams, my family, my past. He listened like every word mattered, and the strangest part, I started to look forward to those little conversations, even when I knew I shouldn't, because I was just the babysitter. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. A few days later, the house was quiet. His niece had fallen asleep early after a long day at the park. I was curled up on the couch with a blanket and a book when he came in, holding 2 mugs of tea. "I figured you'd still be up," he said, handing me one. I thanked him, trying not to overthink it. He sat across from me, but there was something softer in his expression that night, less guarded. "I keep thinking about how much you remind me of her," he said suddenly. I raised an eyebrow. "Her, meaning the woman I look like?" He nodded. "My first love. A long time ago." He leaned back, eyes focused on something far away, not really looking at me anymore. She was bold, kind. She had this light in her, the kind of woman who walks into a room and shifts the whole mood without even trying. I stayed quiet, not sure where this was going. My family didn't approve of her, said she didn't fit in. He made air quotes around the words. They meant she was too different, too honest, too black. I looked down into my mug, suddenly feeling exposed in a way I hadn't before. I was younger then, too weak to fight them, he admitted. Letting her go was the biggest mistake of my life. The room went still, and then he looked at me, really looked at me. "You have her fire," he said softly. "That same light." I didn't know what to say. My heart was pounding. Part of me wanted to run. Another part wanted to ask what happened to her, where she was now. But I didn't ask. I just sat there knowing something between us had shifted forever. After that night, nothing felt the same. He was still polite, still distant in his own way. But now he noticed the little things. If I looked tired, if I skipped lunch, if I smiled less than usual. He started coming home earlier, sometimes even joining us for dinner. And every time his niece laughed, he looked at me like he was seeing something more. One evening, we were all in the living room. She had fallen asleep with her head on my lap after watching her favorite cartoon. I gently brushed her curls away from her face, and he just watched. There was a softness in his eyes I hadn't seen before. "You're good with her," he said quietly. "She's easy to love," I replied without thinking. His voice dropped. "So are you." I looked up, stunned. He quickly cleared his throat and changed the subject, but the air between us was different now. He was trying to be careful, I could tell, but whatever he was feeling, it was growing. And the truth, I was feeling it too. Later that week, his niece asked me the one question I didn't expect. "Are you going to be my new auntie?" I laughed. "No, sweetie, I'm just your babysitter." She tilted her head like she didn't believe me. "But Uncle looks at you like he looks at Mommy in the pictures." I didn't know what to say to that. Kids always notice more than we think. After she went to sleep, I stood in the hallway for a long time, wondering if I should leave, if I was crossing some invisible line. But every time I thought about walking away, I couldn't. Because what was growing between us didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like something waiting to happen. Things started to feel complicated. At first it was just glances and small moments, but now people were noticing. His staff started acting different around me. Short answers, tight smiles. His assistant especially. She used to be polite, almost warm, but now every time I walked into the room, she got quiet. Watched me like I didn't belong there. One afternoon, I overheard her on the phone near the study. She didn't know I was in the hallway. "I don't care what he says," she whispered harshly. "He's not thinking clearly. She's the babysitter, not some long-lost soulmate. This isn't a fairy tale." I backed away before she saw me, heart pounding. The worst part, I couldn't tell if she was wrong. Maybe this wasn't a fairy tale. Maybe I was getting too comfortable in a world that would never be mine. That night, I found myself questioning everything. Was I being foolish? Was he just lonely? Was I just convenient? I even considered quitting, packing up and going back to my quiet little life where things made sense. But then he came home early. He found me sitting on the patio, wrapped in a blanket, lost in thought. "You look like you're about to disappear," he said gently. I shrugged. "Maybe I should." He sat beside me, not touching, just close enough that I felt it. "Don't," he said. "Please don't." I turned to him, unsure. "Why not?" He hesitated. "Because since you walked into this house, it hasn't felt so empty, and I haven't felt so alive." It was the first time he spoke without walls, and for the first time, I let mine down too. But deep down, I knew we weren't done facing what came next. The next morning, I made up my mind. I was going to quit. Not because I didn't care, but because I did. Too much. It was getting harder to pretend I was just there to watch his niece. Harder to ignore the way he looked at me, the way I looked at him. I waited until she was napping, then knocked on his office door. He looked surprised to see me standing there, nervous and fidgeting with the hem of my sleeve. "I need to talk to you," I said. He set his laptop aside and gave me his full attention. "What's wrong?" I swallowed hard. "I think I need to leave. This is starting to feel confusing, and I don't want to get in the way of your life." He stood slowly, walked over, and looked at me for a long time before speaking. "You're not in the way," he said quietly. "You've become the best part of it." I felt my chest tighten. "But don't say you're just the babysitter," he cut in. "You've brought something into this house that hasn't been here in a long time. Warmth, joy, love." I stared at him, stunned. He stepped closer. I was so afraid of repeating the past, of caring too much and losing it again. But watching you, being near you, I realized I don't want to miss another chance. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. So he said it for me. "I'm falling for you." I felt my breath catch. My doubts were still there, but for the first time, so was a possibility. Something real. And in that moment, I didn't feel like the hired help. I felt seen, wanted, like maybe, just maybe, this could be something more. A few days passed, and things between us settled into something soft and unspoken. There were no dramatic declarations, no kisses under the moonlight. Just gentle understanding. But everything changed the evening he walked into the playroom while I was helping his niece with her puzzle. He looked different, less guarded, almost nervous. "There's a charity gala this weekend," he said. "I want you to come, with me." I blinked. "Like, as your guest?" He nodded. "As my date?" My stomach flipped. I hadn't expected that, at all. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" "I don't care what people say anymore," he said simply. "I care what you think." I looked down, heart racing. This wasn't a casual ask. This was him making it real, putting us in front of the world. Was I ready for that? Still, I found myself saying, "Okay." The next few days were a blur. His niece helped me pick a dress. She was more excited than I was. "Uncle never takes anyone. You're special," she whispered as she brushed my curls. The night of the gala, the car ride was quiet but charged. He looked at me like I was the only person in the room, even in a sea of glittering gowns and sharp suits. People stared, whispered, judged. But he never let go of my hand. At one point, someone asked who I was. He looked them straight in the eye and said, "She's with me. Not the babysitter, not the help. With him." It was a small sentence, but it meant everything. That night, as the city lights sparkled outside the ballroom, I realized something. He wasn't just remembering his past, he was choosing me for his future. Weeks passed, and what started as a quiet pull turned into something steady, something real. I was no longer just the girl watching over his niece. I became someone he turned to, someone he trusted, not just with his home, but with his heart. One evening, after dinner, his niece climbed into my lap and asked, "Are you going to stay forever now?" I smiled, brushing a curl from her forehead. Do you want me to? She nodded sleepily. You make him smile. He doesn't smile much. Later that night, he found me on the balcony. We didn't say much, just stood there watching the city lights. Then he said it, simple, quiet, honest. I don't want to lose you. And I realized I didn't want to go back to my old life. Because somehow, in a place I never belonged, I found where I did. Not because of the mansion or the money, but because of the way he saw me, the way I saw him, and the way we chose each other, not in a perfect story, but in a real one. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more love stories told from the heart. Love.